So let's get that out of the way. So yeah, welcome everybody. I've dropped the link to the PD feedback form into the chat pod. I hope moving into next year that we have I suppose, a cleaner solution for gathering who's in the meetings and collecting your feedback rather than links dropped into the chat. But no promises, I think, is all I could say. We'll see if Santa brings me something like that. Today's session, we will be looking nominally at the I2 dashboard in Blackboard, the announcements tool, the journal tool, the groups tool, discussion boards in general, and the grade center. Those are kind of the key kind of points that we generally look at in this session. But I would like to point out that this is probably the last time that we will run this sort of general session around I2. And the reasons for that are probably relatively obvious. One being that we are moving towards transitioning into a new learning management system. You may have seen some of the updates from Janelle Wheat about that. Now, whether that's Canvas or another platform, it's not going to be Blackboard Classic that we've been using anymore. And so really what I would like to spend 2022 doing is getting people familiar with where we're going rather than where we've been. So to begin with, at least in the 30 session, I'll be running some tours through Canvas, hypothetically, just for no reason at all, but we'll have a look in some subject sites and what it looks like to use Canvas for teaching and what the building blocks are for teachers to deliver in that platform. And we'll just say that's a random selection for the time being. But today, as I said, we're going to have a look at these tools. And if you've got particular bugbears about these tools within Blackboard, then by all means, don't be shy. Come off mute and we'll talk about them. But look, just to get a bead on things before we launch into the session today, I am curious about your own comfort levels in I2 currently. And so I have a little bit of an activity just to put in front of you about your confidence levels using parts of I2. And so what I'm doing is sharing a Menti activity with you. And that looks at your confidence levels in using different parts of I2. So hopefully you've got a link in the chat that allows you to jump in and vote and look at a rating between 0 and 5 in terms of how confident you are with the dashboard, the announcement tool, all those different areas that I put in front of you a minute ago. Now, if that portal is not working for people, as I'm not seeing results coming in just yet, I'm happy to share it again. The Menti app is still relatively new.
It's just saying it's loading.
Here we go. I'm seeing some feedback. This is wonderful. Kathy, have you gotten in? Excellent. All right. I love it when a plan comes together. I think that was the famous A-team line, but anyway. All right, this is interesting. The groups tool, not utilized widely, I have to say. Got someone waiting to come in. In you come. Journals, groups. I wonder if this is an indication more of just not having used them much. But I can see from 5 of us having voted in here that generally speaking, people are pretty confident with announcements, and then you know, sort of starts to drop down a little bit, heading down towards using groups. All right, well, that's good to know. And I will stop that activity and we can get back into having a look at each of those tools. So thank you. Screen sharing has stopped. Good to know. Let's share again. We'll go with that one. Okay, first one, the dashboard. When we talk about the dashboard in I2, another way of looking at it would be to say your homepage, but it does use the terminology dashboard. It's the first item in the breadcrumbs at the top. Just make sure I can still see the chat. Okay, now that has opened here. So this screen, as soon as you log into I2, is referred to as the dashboard. It is organized by default into 3 columns with a number of blocks, building blocks within them. They're referred to by Blackboard as modules, hence this word up in the top left-hand corner, add modules. And you'll also see, looking around the screen, sometimes you need to hover your mouse over things. You'll find that there are options like adding quick links to different sections. You can also move across to the top right-hand corner. You'll see this up and down arrow, which will allow you to reorder the items that you see inside your dashboard. And there's also a personalize button. If we click on that, you'll see that it really refers to some pretty basic and perhaps not all that attractive color schemes that you may or may not want to use. But by default, we have a CSU branded theme in place, which overrides this My Institution personalization anyway. So you'll find that whilst this might give you some coloring behind your navigation bars, it's not going to do much else. So that personalized page bit is a bit of a furphy, really. It doesn't allow you to do a lot of personalization that you might be thinking of. With the blocks, you'll find if you move your mouse in next to the title area, it'll change to that 4 arrow sort of crosshair arrangement, and you can left click and drag items into different columns. But by and large, it's really a choice for you about how busy you want this dashboard page to be. At the moment, I have this item down here on the right, needs attention, which really, for me, is to try and remind me about the student view when they come into this. Because in theory, what's supposed to happen when the environment is set up is that their assignment due dates for submission are meant to come into this portal so that they can always see what's coming up before they even get into subject sites. The problem that we have with that is that the integration with our assignments in Blackboard within our subjects is not, I want to say it's not 100%. So this is a reminder for me really about things we need to fix when we move into the next environment, because some types of tests, like using the quizzes and things in Blackboard, they will show up properly within needs attention, and others like EAST assignments, not necessarily. So, this is the reason that I leave that in there, even though it doesn't work 100%. It's a reminder for me that this is something we need to really fix when we move into the next environment. Be interested to know if you guys can see anything yourselves in there, if you've looked at it in terms of your own subjects. But really, this is about the student view, the subjects that they're enrolled into, and the email settings or the notification settings that they get from Blackboard when they have things coming up. Because that integration, that side of things, we did not do particularly well this time around. Before I actually get into the different module types, I'd also like to point out right at the top of the screen, there is 2 areas that you should probably be aware of. One of them is the I2 help. So I don't know how small this is on your screen, probably pretty small. I could make it bigger. The help area for I2, when you click on it, was originally where all of the information, knowledge base articles around different tools within I2 was being stored. Now that the format for that is changing a little bit, and I would probably argue that the most useful thing is this A to Z of resources section. If you go in there and click on Learn More, it will give you a list of all of the tools, for example, that are in place, not just in Blackboard, but also some of the external tools that we use as well, like CSU Replay. I know that they're culling this list a little bit. Things like DOMs, it'll give you links, it'll give you help guides, potentially, if there are some of that information. Use of the discussion boards, things like that. So you'll see some of them are within Blackboard, some of them are outside Blackboard. But at least this is a starting point for where to find information about tools. So that was inside the I2 help, or question mark help, if you want to look at it that way, inside I2. The next thing I'd like to draw your attention to is your profile area, where it's got your name and a drop-down arrow at the top. If you click that, what we're seeing here, again, this is a good empathy exercise for understanding what students can see. I'll move this out of the way. This is a feature of Blackboard that was really meant to tie in as well with the mobile view on mobile phones, that would allow them to be able to choose things like very quickly jump to their grade areas, to be able to see posts that they'd made on discussion boards, to be able to get updates essentially, which again ties into that idea of notifications around when things are due, and also the Blackboard calendar. Again, I would suggest that we manage to utilize only about 50% or less of this functionality for students. They can't log into Blackboard on their phones and get kind of accurate information like this the way that we want them to. And again, this is an area that needs to be fixed when we go to our next tool over the course of next year in 2023, where all of that integration has to work. So at the moment, it's hit and miss. Sometimes it does work. You can hit posts and go to all of your discussion board posts. You can hit the updates area, and that will show you notifications, announcements from academics. So it's worth kind of understanding what this looks like for students. But also for you, you'll notice that down the bottom here, we've got a settings area. And this is what I want to draw your attention to today. If you go into settings, and particularly to the notification settings, this is where you and your students can make decisions about the type of updates that you want to get. How many emails are you getting from I2? How frequently, for what types of things? So you'll notice, for example, you can jump into things like the subjects that you're teaching. If you want to look at the notification settings that relate to those. You can go into individual subjects, but you'll notice that I just have hundreds of them, so don't pay too much attention to those. Right now, I want to get into general. And I can start looking at, do I want to get individual messages, or do I want to just get one email daily, which creates a digest of all those emails? So you don't have to get an email every time something from Blackboard is coming, and students can select this, for example. They might just want a digest. Do we want due date reminders? So these are obviously, that's quite important for students, but it only works if that calendar integration is working, as I was talking about before. And again, they have the same sort of settings relating to org sites. Those are the general settings. If we get into our bulk notification settings underneath here, subjects that I'm teaching, let's have a look at that. And you can choose the individual subjects. You can, if you're teaching more than one subject, you can basically set these en masse for all of them. So I might say, okay, I'm doing that one, and that one, for example, and move them across. And now I can choose what type of notifications I want. For example, do I want mobile phone pushes? So SMS messages, for example, if there's a new announcement in Blackboard, probably not, but it goes down to that level of detail. If there are assignments that have been made available, do you want them just on your Blackboard dashboard? Do you want an email? Do you want a mobile notification? If there are assignments due, if there are assignments that need grading, so that might be relevant to you. If you've got students submitting, you could get those individual notifications, or maybe you can't think of anything worse. It's possible, but you need to be aware that all of those settings can be turned off every time a new discussion board post is in there. Do you want to be notified? So it's worth having a look through the individual notification items and making sure that they're either turned on or turned off, and in what format you might want them. So yeah, do have a look through those. Most of the time, the responses I get from teachers are, I want to turn as many of these off as I can, unless they're absolutely critical, and I completely understand that. You just need to know how to do it. So that's where we go into. It's at the top of your dashboard. You'll find your name, the drop down. You go into your settings area and your notification settings. The rest of it to do with contrast settings and other things, privacy settings, I wouldn't waste my time on, but you can certainly go in there. Maybe you want to change the text size. You could do that as well inside that area. All right, if we go back to our dashboard, let's have a look at some of these modules. And I'm not going to dwell on this overly long, but it is worth knowing where they are. As I said, each of these different areas in the columns is called a module. Each of the modules, if you hover your mouse in the top right-hand corner, will have a little cog, and you can configure those to some extent. So if inside the subjects area, you can click on the cog and customize which subjects you can see in terms of grouping them by what terms they're available. Do you want to show them or not? Do you want to expand it so it shows all the subjects that are in that session? Do you want to edit individual subjects that you're teaching so that you see things like ID, the name, the instructors, the announcements, the tasks? All of that information can be visible on your dashboard if you want it to be. What I want to point out with this, another part of Blackboard that is broken, is that if you have more than 100 of these that you are enrolled in as an instructor or full staff, this stops working effectively. It's not going to show you all of the subjects that you need. But you can customize the sessions and the subjects that you can see on your dashboard in this area, and you can customize how much information you see. So that's the subjects one, and I would argue that's probably the most important thing on your dashboard, and how you jump into the subjects that you're enrolled into. At the bottom of the My Subjects area, and it is collapsible, if you hit left click on this drop down arrow, I can make it smaller. You will also find the More Subjects area if you are enrolled in more than the minimum kind of view. So, you know, there might be 20 in here, for example. No worries, Kathy, do what you need to do. All right, so the My Subjects module is, that's what it's used for. Some of the others, there's some of them we can't move. They're on our dashboards and they're locked in there by CSU settings. Things like a copyright notice. You can expand those if you're curious and want to have a look at those, but they appear on every student dashboard as well as every academics dashboard. Announcements, for example, you can get a summary of the announcements that have gone out and you can jump into those. For me, I also have the staff links module, which I find handy because it links to a bunch of tools like Panopto, EASE, Quasar, the outlines tool, all that kind of thing. Do all of you in this meeting see the staff links module on your dashboards? Getting the nod from Jane. So I'm hoping that this is visible. Thank you, Susan. If it's not, people can add it using the add module setting in the top left-hand corner. I'm going to go in there now and show you what's in there. Click on add module. And you'll find that there are categories for these. Some of them are specific to Blackboard. Some of them are student services related, for example, more general toolboxes. But over on the right-hand side, they are alphabetized, and you can go through this list and add yours. You might want to add bookmarks, which is essentially hyperlinks. I'm not sure that you would want to do that in Blackboard because you can just do it in your browser. Most of us use favorites or starred pages or bookmarks in our web browsers. So the idea of having one just within Blackboard, probably not going to be all that useful to you. Similarly, a dictionary tool, maybe you're already using dictionary.com or something like that. But there are some tools in here that, you know, you can do a direct library search from your dashboard if you wanted to do that. So there are shortcuts inside here that you may or may not be interested in. There is a notes section, so you can add maybe the equivalent of post-it notes to your dashboard. And I do know that that gets utilized by a number of staff. So yeah, have a look through those if you're, you know, thinking that your dashboard needs some sprucing up, but that's how you do it. Dashboard and add module. And as I said, you can left click and drag each of those module areas around if you don't like where they're positioned currently. So that's the dashboard in a nutshell, the I2 dashboard. Does anyone have any questions about that or would like me to delve any deeper into that? Nope. All right. Moving right along. The announcement tool. Okay. I did notice when we were doing our little exercise before in Mentimeter that confidence levels with announcements, I would suggest are medium, middling, and maybe people would like some more help with the announcement tool. Let's have a quick look through a walkthrough of the tool, and then we'll have a look at using announcement templates specifically, which are available to all staff. All right, so if I go into a subject anywhere, let's find this will do. You have the announcements tool sitting underneath, hopefully within your learning community area. You click on announcements and it opens up the tool, and potentially with your announcements, they're always going to sit here, but for students, they can revisit them. The most recent ones will go to the top, but you can scroll back down through the history and look at the announcements as they go in. Maybe you've been using a template that has a faculty banner in it, but essentially the process for adding the announcements, we go to create announcement, we put in our subject line, we put in the body of our text. Potentially, maybe you've been adding hyperlinks into your announcements. Then we have to make a decision about whether or not we only want it to come out on a particular date, or more than likely when you're sending it is when you intend for it to go out. And then by and large, what's supposed to happen really is that we click this box, send a copy of the announcement immediately as an email. Because what we're acknowledging there is that the way most students will get this information first is going to be through an email, probably through their mobile device. I'm generalizing, but that's usually kind of the first port of call. And then potentially they either log into the subject site, maybe, and they'll see it in there as well in the announcement section. But having done that aspect, your information, check the box about announcements, then we hit submit, and that then goes out to the emails of all of the students. However, this doesn't allow for a lot of customization going about it this way. You get generic text types. We don't have a lot of formatting options in terms of what our text looks like in the editor. There's not really an option here for attachments by and large, apart from hitting that plus button and adding local files, PDFs, things like that. It's not going to allow you to embed multimedia. Okay, so if people trying to embed things like YouTube clips into this, they will be able to see them inside the announcement in the subject site, but they're not going to really be able to see things like images and other things in the email that they receive if we go about it this way, just using the editor like this. If we're looking to get announcements that have, I suppose, a higher level of formatting available, we need to look at using announcement templates. And the way we go about that is inside this subject site, I'm guessing. No, unless they've hidden it. Hang on, I'll see if I can find it. No, she doesn't have it. All right, I will find where they are. Let's go into my dashboard. No, we'll go into an org site. I have the process in a cheat sheet and a video to watch very quickly on how to use announcement templates. I'll share those with you in a second. But announcement templates, here we go. When you add announcement templates to your subject site, you end up with a number of these content areas that have a faculty banner, title area for it, text to type in your announcement, and then a series of action lists or items, icons that you can then customize the text that goes next to them. So the way that this works essentially is that you would drag, highlight the one that you want, then turn around and say, right, I'm going to send an announcement. Create a new announcement, give it a title, and then you can paste all of that straight into your announcement and then start customizing this, right? So potentially maybe you want to remove bits and pieces of some of the text. Maybe you just want the banner. Put in your title. Week 2 update. All right, then put in your text, blah, blah, blah. Maybe from this list, you only want a couple of these icons that you're going to use regularly. Maybe you only want those top 3. I can remove all the others. So in my announcements, I'm going to provide information. Maybe I'll use this icon about things that need to be discussed. And maybe there's tasks or assessments. At this point, I can turn around and go and then customize that text. Okay, so I could turn around and say part of this is this week, keep an eye out for blah, 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 blah. You put that in there. Discussion topic for this week is, put that in there, and assessment related stuff, right? Assessment 2 coming up. Don't forget to blah, 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 right? So you can customize your announcements. And at that point, when you send the email out to the students, they will see this formatting. They get the banner, they get the icons, they get the text. All you need to do is to paste in the template and customize it. Okay. So the process for getting an announcement template into your subject site is very easy. But I will, in the slides for today, I've actually, I think, linked to how to do it. So I'll provide those slides again. You can just click on that link. It's a 5-minute video that shows you where to get the package, how to import it into your subject site and use it. All right, so I will drop that in to the chat for you again now while I'm thinking about it. But basically, that process is going to point you towards doms.csu.edu.au. Opens up this interface. You can search for the word announcement. And you'll see there the master templates are in there. And you can grab the file that you need to load into your subject site from there. All right, so it's a pretty simple process, and thereafter you will be able to go to that announcement templates area, highlight the bits you want, drop them into your posts and send them. But first you need to get the announcement templates folder imported into your subject site. Okay, that's the announcement templates. Would anyone like to talk about announcements at all for other reasons or more about that process? I'm happy to answer any questions about it. No, we're all good? Okay. If you do, hang around afterwards and I'm happy to talk about them some more. We also usually prompt questions along the lines of good announcements, bad announcements, what makes a good one or a bad one. This is obviously a little bit subjective, but there are some commonalities to the themes that come out of that conversation. Usually it comes down to volume more than anything else. If you're sending out more than one announcement a week, then there is, it's probably worth looking at why, if it's not being consolidated into a digest. Are they emergency critical information type updates, or are they just something's occurred to you and maybe you just want to remind the students? By default, we recommend that you try and just send the one each week, potentially as a kickoff for the week, maybe the week ahead. And that's where that idea of a digest comes in. But, there have been examples of where we've had up to 180 announcements sent to students in a single session from a single subject. And that's starting to get pretty crazy at that point. And given that we're saying that most of the time they're receiving these first and foremost as an email, we also face the prospect of being added to spam folders, which is probably not what you want as a teacher, having subject information being added to spam. But think about that volume question. How much? If it's critical and the students are getting used to the idea that periodically, maybe every Monday, Sunday, whatever, their teacher is sending out, the update for the week, then that's something that's more than likely going to be paid attention to rather than, any random day with a random bit of information. We also bring up this idea of where do your announcements sit within your communication plan. And that usually involves teachers sending out as part of their outline or the introduction to their subjects, expressing how that communication for the subject is going to happen. So maybe when you're breaking down or giving that introduction to the subject, each week I'm going to be sending you an update for the week. You can expect that on Sunday, Monday, whatever it is, and that will have the information for X, Y, and Z. Otherwise, if you need to get a hold of me critically, here is my contact information or my hours for contact. Fit it within the context of that communication plan. General discussion in around assessment, for example, will happen within the relevant discussion board folder, for example, situated all within that explanation of how communication for this subject will happen. Announcements, discussion folders, contact information, etc., All of that can form part of the information that you give to students at the start of the session. And then there's no missed expectations, false expectations about how communication is going to happen. That would be my suggestion for how to situate announcements alongside those other tools. Okay. Questions, comments, criticisms? I'm open to all of them, really. All good? Okay. The journal tool. Okay, this one doesn't get used massively within Blackboard. However, I will say that there are a couple of really interesting benefits to using the journal tool. And usually they're about people trying to avoid using easts. So we'll just get that out of the way. And I'll show you some examples of how it's used and walk through the tool itself. All right, so if we have a look at this journalism subject, and I feel like I've got it somewhere. Here we go, Journalism 101. These guys have an assessment task here where they're asked to basically provide reflections around news stories and things, and they're using the journal tool to submit rather than submitting via easts. So obviously in your subject outline, choosing the assessment type, you'll be able to choose journal from the drop-down in the subject outline tool. For the students, when they come in, they get a link or a portal directly to the place where they're submitting the task. And this is what the journal tool looks like. Students click on Create Journal Entry, and it just opens a very basic editor where they can put in, obviously, the title and their information. It's the same editor that you use when you make announcements, etc. So they can add attachments using the plus button and finding a local file. If they had made a recording, for example, in Panopto, they'd also be able to link a Panopto video in here if they needed to. But the most important thing is you can also attach underneath, when they make that submission, the academic will get a notification, unless they've turned notifications off. All of the class submissions will be visible to the instructor then over here on the right-hand side. So they don't have to go anywhere else to get them or batch download them or anything like that. They can get the individual submissions by clicking on the class list, finding one of the individual student submissions. Now, what's going to happen here is that I'm going to pause the recording for today's session because I'm going to be looking at a student's work. That's not going to be captured in the recording. So I'm just going to pause that and I'll recommence the recording. But yeah, that's essentially why the journal tool is popular. It also has settings within the journal tool, and we'll go and make a new journal entry in a second, that allow you to determine if students can see each other's work or if it's private.
We can still see the students' work.
You can, just a comment at this point. Okay, that's good. I will get out of that. Let's go into journals. All right, so you can see they are used quite a lot within this particular subject, but let's make a new journal entry and have a look. We have a question from Sue. Do you create the journal assessment as you would a test or a journal? We'll do one here and I'll show you exactly how it works. Create journal, by the way, if we're not sure about how to get to that, if you go down in your subject management area, under subject tools, you will find journals in there. That's where we start, okay? Subject management and journals. Right, when we go to create a new journal, you'll need a name for it. Maybe it's called Assessment 1, whatever the case may be. You put your instructions for the task. Maybe you point them towards the subject outline for more information. Availability is a yes/no button, which will basically toggle off the student view. So you can make it invisible to them if it's not available. Okay, they're not going to be able to see it. The other way, of course, as with all Blackboard items, is that you can hide it from students as well. Then we get our date. Don't worry about indexing. That's kind of irrelevant. Very few people use this tool for actually submitting journals. I'll just point that out. It's quite funny. They use it for lots of other reasons. But then we have some options here. Do we want users to be able to edit and delete their entries after they've made the initial submission? Something to think about. So with an assessment, for example, it's not uncommon for people to probably leave this off and say to them, what you only make your post after you're ready to submit it. A lot of people, for example, might do it in a Word document and work on it, etc., and then attach it once it's ready. But if progressively adjusting the document is part of the task, then this would need to be turned on. Deleting comments, for example, who's going to make the comments? By default, again, as I said, the instructor is able to make comments. Other students are not able to make comments by default. Then we get into the third setting, permit the subject users to view the journal. If this is off, the other students can't see the journal entries. Only you can as the teacher. If it's ticked and you want the students to be able to see everyone's posts, at that point, then maybe you'd consider this other section about commenting and etc., whether that's part of the task or not. So there's that kind of privacy aspect. By default, it's private. Only you, the instructor, can see every person's posts in there. Right, then we get into the assessment part, grading or no grading. If we want it to be an assessment, we need to turn on grade and we allocate the points for the task. All right, so that's at that point, it's going to create a column in the grade center with that many points, and the task will then, the grades for the task will then go straight into the grade center. Okay, and then we hit submit. If you're familiar with attaching rubrics into Blackboard and to particular assignment tasks, you can attach the rubric here. The example that we just looked at a minute ago, the academic had actually copied and pasted the table from the subject outline directly into the feedback area. So that's up to you, whether or not you want to try and attach the rubric within Blackboard itself or just paste it in as part of your feedback. And this is arguably because some teachers are just more comfortable marking outside this environment and just attaching the feedback sheet or whatever the case is to the task feedback. That's up to you. It's a whole other area of comfort zone working with rubrics with Blackboard. All right, so that's essentially how we would make an accessible journal item. At that point, the journal's created, but you would need to provide the link to the students somewhere within the navigation bar, because at the moment they can't see it. Even if it's visible to students and available to them, there's no content item that mentions the journal or links to it at the moment. So you have to provide that. And the way we do that, let's say that it was assessment 1. You would need to go into, just remind myself here, the tools area, for example, and you can link directly to journals through tools. The other way to get to it is to build a content area, and you can link to the journal within the content. I'm going to do it the tools way first. If I go to tools and then select journals, it's now asking, do I want to link to a particular journal, which I've already created? Absolutely, I do. And then you find your assessment item in the list. If you've only made one, this is going to be a very short list, right? You choose the item and that's it. Hit next, and the actual link to submit the task is made available to the students. You can add more instruction to it underneath if you want to. And again, that available, not available thing is configurable. You can turn off the visibility there. You can also set display timers on it using your date settings. If you don't want it to be visible until week 3, day 4, whatever, you can change those. But once you submit that, it's now visible to the students right here. There's the link, right? So that's where they would be going to submit the assignment. So this provides an alternate pathway for document submission other than EASTs, which is usually where people are asking me, how do I do that? Any questions around using the journal tool? I'll delete that before Jock kills me. No? Okay, moving right along. I'm also aware of time as well. We're going pretty slowly, which is pretty standard for me, I think, if you've been in my sessions. Okay, the groups tool. Why do we use groups? There are a lot of different motivations for getting into using the groups tool, but by and large, it's about large cohorts. When we have large numbers of students within a subject or tasks which require the students to be organized into smaller teams as such, using the groups tool is one way to get around that. If we look at some examples around that in law, for example, they use groups for study groups. They encourage the students to get into study teams or study groups as part of the law subjects, and they create groups to allow that to happen. So what all they're doing at that point in time is going down to the users and groups area in the subject management panel, going to groups, and then they have created a group set that's called study groups. In this case, they've created 6. They put a cap on how many students can be in each group, and they tell them, we've set up 7 groups, for example, for you to enroll yourself into. If you want to join a study group, it's first in, best dressed into the group, and then you and your group can use that tool to share information, to organize how the study group is going to operate. In the case of that law subject, they've actually provided guidelines on how to use those study groups. That's part of that explanation information that's in there. And they provide suggestions on how they do it. How often are you going to meet, for example, agree on what you're going to be doing, how you're going to contact each other. And then they provide the link to the groups tool itself for people to jump in. And that has been very successful. This is what that view looks like for the students, self-assigning. And then the students jump in and enroll themselves into a group as long as it's not full. What I want to point out is that even though inside these groups, they provided 3 tools. 4 tools, I should say, in this case. They provided a file exchange if students wanted to send files to each other, a group discussion board for posts that only their group can see, the tasks list, I don't know why they added that, no one uses it, and a send email tool, which would only send email to people within the group. The way that this panned out really is that the students used the group, enrolled themselves into the group, and then really only used it to establish how they were going to communicate moving forwards. Very rarely do students stay within the groups tool to share information. They use it to establish the tool that they're most comfortable using to meet. So they might jump into Zoom, they might use a tool like WhatsApp. Most commonly, we've found that with the students, that's the one they're most common with. So they just shared each other's mobile numbers in their group, jumped into a WhatsApp group, and then everything from that point on happened outside the subject site. But all of the feedback we've had from the students is that they loved, I guess, being having that opportunity or that suggestion, that first starting point to get into groups, to meet together, to help, particularly with an online subject, which can be quite isolating otherwise. I want to show you how to create the groups, and then we'll move on unless you want to talk more about it. What we do with the groups tool, as I said, if you go down to subject management, users and groups, click on the groups button, then we go to create, and you're given 2 options here. You can create either a single group for a single purpose, or you can create a group set, which is a very quick way of creating 10 groups at a time, for example, whatever. That's what I'm going to look at today. You've got 3 options here: self-enrolling, random enrolling, or manual enrolling. Manual means that you're doing it as the instructor, deciding who's in the group. Random means it's a crapshoot at that point. The student could be put into whatever group. Or self-enrolling, which for the purpose of the study groups concept is what they used. So I'm going to create a group set that's self-enrolling. Give it a generic name, remembering that this is going to be the title for all the groups plus the number for the group. So if this was student study group, for example, and then it'll, in brackets afterwards, it's going to add group 1, group 2, group 3. Thanks, Mawson. You can put some text in there, but most people provide the instruction inside the content area rather than here. Do we want it to be visible to the students? Yes or no? Do you only want them to be able to see the sign-up sheet? Remember that view that I showed you a minute ago that just had sign-up sheet? That's exactly what that view is. Once they've signed up to a group, then it will take them into those tools that we looked at. Discussion boards, file exchange, etc. What tools do you want available to them? Most of these you're probably going to be turning off. A blogging tool for the group? No thanks. A discussion board for the group? Yes, please. Do you want them to be able to create their own forums or only you create the forums? By default, they can create what they like. The email tool, file exchange, journaling just within the group, I'm going to turn that off. The tasks thing, we don't really use that option in Blackboard. A wiki for the group. Well, you could have one there if you wanted to. You could also make it gradable if you wanted each of the groups to be writing their own wikis. This is one way to do that. I'm going to turn that off. And then it needs a name for the sign up sheet. So, you know, I've got a couple of default ones in there telling them what it is. Study group self-enrollment sign up sheet. Again, you can provide more instruction if you need it. This is the most important part. How many people is the cap for the group? Maximum number. Again, probably less than 5 is not going to be ideal because you'll get lifters and leaners, the same as we get everywhere else. Some people putting in all the legwork and some people just ghosting along, but you also don't want too many in there. So I would suggest somewhere between 5 and 7 is a decent number for your groups if they're going to be used for that study group type purpose. So I'll put in 7, show the members in the group. This is an interesting one. Do you want the students to be able to see the names of the other members before they join the group? It's getting into that whole popularity contest thing, I guess, but maybe if they've got issues with some of the others and they want to be able to see who's in it or not, you'll need to check that so that it appears on the front page. Do we want the students to be able to sign up from the groups listing page? That means that they would see an item, just the same way that they see my grades in the student view, they also would see a button that says my groups. And at that point, they can join that way. If not, untick it, and all they will be getting is that, that sign up sheet that we talked about. All right, so that's the other option. How many groups do we want to create? Maybe we want 10, 5, 4, etc. You put the number in there. And then the last option is about creating a smart view. And the smart view basically is just kind of the headings and the names of the people in the group and the tooling. So it's like an abbreviated, consolidated view of what's available to the groups. Then you hit submit, and the end result is that you get your groups there, the members. You as the instructor can go in and see who's in them. But by and large, for this purpose anyway, it's a student-focused tool. Any questions in and around use of the groups tool? No? Okay. All right.
Hang on, Lachlan, can I just ask how the students know it's there? Like, where do you link it to them?
All right, very good point. Let's go back to groups. If you haven't ticked that box that allowed for students to see the My Groups button, you need to provide part of the content that links to it. It's a very good point. In this case, the academic has created a content area called study groups. They've provided the text explanation, which is just a content item. And then underneath, they've provided the sign up link. And the way they do that is the same as I was showing you with the journal tool. You need to go to tools, and underneath tools is groups. So that's where you can add the tool link, at which point that you can link underneath to a particular group set. So we created the sign up sheet for the student groups. So I would be linking to that particular set that I've already created, and then hit next, and it creates that link for them to jump in. Right, that's the way to do that. Make sense? Yeah. Slight oversight on my part, sorry. All right. Now, we've got an option here because of our time constraints. We can look at the discussion boards, if you would like to look at those, or we can spend that last 5 minutes looking at the grade center. Dealer's choice. No, not dealer's choice. That would be me. You guys, your choice. Which one of those two things would you like to look at in our time together? What do we think? Discussion board, says Jane. All right, Jane, let's do it. The discussion boards. It's a real point of controversy, I guess, discussion boards, in that Some people would argue that, 1985 is calling and they want their discussion boards back because it was one of the first original types of tools used for online learning, and that everyone engaging in them, there would be thousands of posts and a lot of engagement, and everyone was wanting to contribute and be a part of it. And then we face potentially the reality of the modern pragmatic student, maybe, apart from that, those that are really, really keen to be involved, where we're dealing with this rhetoric around, if it's not accessible, they won't do it. So that's kind of the dichotomy that you get with discussion boards. There are some very clean and simple ways to use the tool. And essentially that is for critical purposes and clear labeling, the two kind of key points around using discussion boards like that. So let's have a look at a couple. I'll jump into whatever I can find. When we use the discussion boards, this one, for example, has one and only one. It's simply called the main subject forum that they have in there. We open it up and we have a number of posts. Sorry, let's get the jargon right. We have forums. Inside the forum, we have threads. We might call them topics. And inside threads, we have posts, which are the individual entries. So we have 3 levels to the hierarchy: forum, thread, post. And decisions for you to make as the instructor about how you want that to work. Do you want students to be able to add new topics or threads, or do you want them to operate within your structure and just add posts within the threads that you have created? So it's important that you kind of figure out how you want the forum to work. And you'll see here, for example, they simply had the one forum. Inside that forum, they had essentially what had occurred to the academic at different points in time. So you could see he's made one at the beginning saying hi to people, introductions, welcome, etc. And then basically when things had cropped up to do with assessment. And all of that was just organized within one single forum. Let's look at some other examples where maybe they've taken a different tack. All right. We're looking at a law subject now, where not only do they have the main subject forum, but they've also created a separate forum for every one of the assessment tasks for the subject. Remembering forum is the top level. So inside each of those, we're going to have different topics relating back to that first assessment. So maybe that's overdoing it, having a forum for every assessment. Maybe you could just have one forum for all assessment items and then a single thread for each assessment task. And then the students could organize all of their posts against the task that it relates to. So there are ways to structure use of the discussion board tool rather than again, having a free-for-all. In this case, the students are posting questions in there, and arguably the academic has told them as part of their communication strategy, if you have questions around assessment, you need to go to the discussion forum, to the particular forum or thread for that task, and that's where you put your question. Nowhere else. Otherwise, I won't be seeing it or I won't be responding to it, whatever the case may be. So a targeted discussion forum. Let's have a look at some of the settings when we actually create a discussion board forum. If we go to create forum, we get some options. You can put in your description above if you need, if there are instructions about it, remembering that a forum is the top level or the folder, if you will, for all the individual topics. Available to students, yes or no? Do we want it to have adaptive settings, only be visible after a certain point in time? Do we want it to be the standard view where everyone sees all the posts and can make posts themselves? Or there is an option there for where participants are required to contribute or create their own topic themselves before they can see those of others. This is a very specific kind of use of discussion forums, and it usually relates to tasks where you might want a student for an assessment to add their own contribution or their own topic before they can view or comment on the work of others. So if you're getting into kind of a peer learning type use and potentially assessment use of discussion forums, you might want to think about that restricted access that requires contribution before commenting or visibility of others' work. Is it accessible? By default, no, but you can make a forum accessible, turning on the points and the marks, and it will then create a column within the grade center with that grade, and then the students' contributions or their threads would then need to have individual grades added to them. I would point out that although the grading center, the discussion forum can be used for assessment, it's more complex to use for grading and feedback than the journal method that we looked at earlier. The journal response, etc., is all within one single screen. It's quite clean, and you provide your feedback and your grade on the right, and it goes in. Discussion forums, it's a bit more complex because you've got to work through that hierarchy of, are you grading the whole forum, the topic, the posts within the topic, commenting from students and feedback, are they getting individual grades, etc.? It starts to get very layered. So I don't usually see a lot of people using discussion forum posts for assessment for that reason, because you start needing to get into those different layers. But you certainly can make it accessible. You can also grade individual threads, topics from students. And at the moment, you'll see that by default, the ability for students to create new threads is turned off. So you need to have a think about that setting. There is a subscription option attached to discussion board threads, which means that students can get notifications when something new is added. So if you want that to be part of the strategy and you're advising students to subscribe to either one forum or multiple forums in the discussion board, you need to make sure that subscriptions are turned on. If you don't want them getting those notifications, then you can turn off subscriptions as well. This is probably more to do with whether or not other student work is visible to them or not. So you can stop it, stop the subscription aspect. Editing of posts, etc. Do you want them to be able to delete posts, edit their posts, etc.? You can turn that off and on. Usually, people want to be able to edit posts after the fact. If they've got things that need to be added or removed, if they've made a mistake. But again, if it's accessible, then this would probably stay off, because you don't want them going back and making removing things after the fact. Attachments are on by default, and other people replying to individual posts can use the quote tool within a post as well. Rating, if you wanted peers to be able to give stars or a mark out of 5, for example, to other people's posts, can be turned on. But again, that's not part of the assessment aspect itself. So it would be an informal, social kind of grading of someone else's post if you were going to use that aspect. It's also very, very difficult to move discussion board content around between subject sites. So if you've set up a particular structure, whilst you can move the forums that you create and the threads within them into another subject site, a following session, the individual posts themselves will be archived. The posts do not come across from one session to another. So the structure is maintained, but the individual content within them won't come across, which sometimes people ask me about. Anything specifically you'd like to look at with discussion boards, Jane?
I'm just wondering how you get the students not to be able to create a thread.
Right. So that's part of the settings when we create the forum.
Yeah. I must have missed that tick box.
Or I glossed over it, one or the other. Right, here it is. Allow members to create new threads, on or off.
Right, okay.
All right, at that point, if that's turned off, they have to use your structure that you've created and post within that. They can't create the topic threads themselves. So yeah, I suppose a very clean and controlled way of providing a discussion board with structured forums and threads and posts, with the areas that you've set aside, for Q&A or something like that, is make sure that's off. And then that way they can only post within the area that perhaps you've identified that you'll be using. So this is the forum and the thread that I monitor for questions on this assignment. You post within here. Not here, 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 here. Good question. All right. Look, well, obviously we've gone over time, as I do pretty much every time, but happy to hang around for a minute if people have specific questions around any of this stuff. But I'll point out again that probably the last time that we run an I2 specific session around tools and things in Blackboard. But if you do have particular questions, please do reach out, and I'm happy to go through any of these aspects with you. Next time round in 30, we'll be having a tour through Canvas and how content is organized and delivered through that platform. But yeah, great to have you all along, and I hope you all have a Merry Christmas, a decent sized break, better than me, back on the 4th, etc. And we'll see you all in the next one. Thanks, everybody. Take it easy.
Thanks, Lachlan. Can I ask a question about Canvas? Sorry, I'm losing my voice.
No, absolutely. When I talk about it, I sound the same. I'll just stop the recording, sorry.
Yeah, sure.